Welcome back to Just Jocelyn. I am one half of your host, Sabrina Hannon.
And I'm the other half, Jasmine Heron. This week we're discussing season 4, episode 7, Back in the Hellmouth, The Initiative.
Yee! This is such a fun episode and it's so important.
I really appreciate this episode coming right after our episode Wild at Heart, the heartbreak of Oz, to have some lighthearted moments in this episode.
Yes, definitely. Especially since so Oz, Seth Green is no longer in the opening title, but he has been replaced in the opening credits with Spike, James Marsters. Yay!
I haven't even paid attention. Has Riley even made it into the
No. I don't think he makes it in until the next season.
Okay.
I could be wrong on that, but I think that is the case.
Okay.
But yes, such a good episode. There are things from this episode that I still say to this day to like non-Buffy fans. Like they're just part of my vocabulary. Yep. The warning that Willow gives.
Yes.
Yep. So it starts off with the school cafeteria, and it's Riley and his friend Forrest, and yeah, he comes in a little bit later, but first it's just the two of them, and Forrest is kind of being gross. Like it's not the worst locker room talk, but it's locker room talk.
He's like, the ladies. I love me the ladies. And we are some fine male specimen that should be checking out the ladies.
And Riley's like, I'm just trying to check out these papers, man. Like, I got to get these graded.
Uh-huh.
And oh, go ahead.
I do love this one line where he's like, ooh, look at that. And Riley looks over and it's Buffy. And he goes, that's Buffy. And he's like, ooh, I like it. She's so hot. She
Yeah, and Riley just like I think it's during this when Buffy has entered the cafeteria and is struggle busting it the whole way, right? So first she has the soda cup that gets over full and like foamy, and so she sips some, and then she fights with the ice cream machine. And
sorry. Hey, one.
Okay, so yeah, Buffy's really struggle busting it when she comes in with the soda cup and it's extra foamy, so she sucks a bunch of the foam out, and then she goes over to the ice cream machine, and it has to be strawberry ice cream, but she breaks the handle off of it and she's trying to put it back on, and she finally gives up and just like throws it the handle and walks away and like leaves it for the next person to deal with. Which what the hell else is she gonna do? And then once she gets everything, pays for it, she trips and it just goes everywhere.
Yep. And this is not usual Buffy.
I mean, we've seen her struggle in this cafeteria before. Like, this seems to be like her awkward zone. But as all of this is going on, these guys are still talking about like how attractive she is and how great. And Riley's just like, don't you think she's kind of peculiar? And none of the guys don't think that. They're just seeing her, which she is struggling with an ice cream machine. At that point, like seeing her try to jam it back on and be like, a little bit, but they're like, no.
So then we go back to Giles and Xander, and Giles has done a beautiful sketch of the commando guys, and which Xander says is the latest in fall fascism.
Oh yes.
And then they realize that they're not needed, like the Scooby Gang is not needed for this, and Xander's like, well, what happens if we summon up some evil for us to fight? And Giles gives him a look, and you can't tell what he's thinking, but when Buffy walks in, he goes, it's probably a wee bit immoral.
Yep.
Like, we're not gonna do that, but I considered it.
We are skipping a big part actually, because so the scene with the guys ends with Riley and his friends, and with Forrest saying, I bet a lot of guys would like to get their hands on her, referring to Buffy. And then we just see Spike looking very dead and his lips all chapped and white, laying on the floor of a white room with an electrified plexiglass or glass cage thing. And he's saying, Slayer, repeatedly.
He wants to get his hands on the Slayer.
Yes. And then we see that it's not just one cell. There are many cells with not just vampires and Spike, but all different sorts of demons.
Yep.
And then we go into the credits and Giles and Xander.
And then Buffy says, okay, yeah, Commando guys, but she's not patrolling tonight. She is taking Willow to a party because Willow is a black hole of despair.
Yes. And she tells Giles and Xander that they will be patrolling, much to their enjoyment, actually. They're like, yes, finally, something to do. So when Buffy... My brain. Oh, not Buffy. It goes to Spike, pacing back and forth.
Yep, back to Spike. He's pacing around. Some blood drops from the ceiling, and he's about to drink it.
In a bag. It's not just like raining blood.
A blood bag drops down. And the vampire that we saw from, I think it was the freshman. It was the one that ran away right at the very beginning, who escaped. The one that was the group that was picking off the freshman.
Yes.
What was her name?
Sunshine?
Sunshine, yes.
I was like, Sunday, yeah. Sunshine is the name of that Drusilla gives the dog, the puppy that she's going to eat.
Yep. So this vampire who was part of that, who is the first vampire that we saw captured by the initiative, says that he's just, a lab rat. They're all lab rats. And he warns them that they drug the blood. And so when you're so hungry that you have to eat the blood, you pass out and then they perform experiments on you. And Spike is like, it's the Slayer. Like, she's so conniving. And then we flash to Buffy struggling with her pen that has exploded all over her notes.
Yep. Yeah. And
Buffy.
Yeah. And Sarah Michelle Gellar is just doing so well this episode, like really personifying those awkward moments all humans find themselves in. We've all had a pen that's like leaked on us before and we're like, or maybe we haven't broken a machine like that has ice cream, but we all have had these like weird, awkward experiences. And I've definitely been someone who's broken something in public before and I can't fix them. Just like, sorry, next person.
Okay, here we
go. There is no one around that I can tell about this. So it's very relatable. And so they're in they're never in any other class but Professor Walsh.
They're only in Professor Walsh's. That's the only class they go to, is Professor Walsh's class. Yes. And so Willow approaches Riley after class.
Not Riley. It was
no, she does. She approaches Riley and she says to Riley, "You left a name on Daniel Osborne." And he's like, "Oh, I heard he dropped out." She's like, "No, he's going to be back." And that's when Professor Walsh interjects and she's like, "Well, not to my class, and she then, says to Willow that, Willow thinks that her exception is exceptional, but because Professor Walsh is, quote, neither a freshman nor a narcissist, she does not agree. And basically really putting down Willow, calling Willow, naive and narcissistic, and Buffy's just watching this entire exchange, and she is pissed.
Yeah, because Willow runs out, and that's when Buffy approaches Professor Walsh. Now, obviously, Professor Walsh doesn't have the backstory of this, and a lot of college classes will have something written into the syllabus where if you miss X amount of classes, you're done.
Yep.
And she is definitely a professor that has that. I would say 2 or 3 classes. That is my guess. Unless you have like, you were hospitalized, and then you probably get an incomplete if you're lucky.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that you get to be a nasty asshole to a student.
Well, I'm guessing it's only 2 classes because when Buffy missed 1 class, she says, you miss a class again, you're out.
Yeah.
So,
or at least 1 class that we know of.
Yeah.
But Buffy goes up and, she tells Professor Walsh in no uncertain terms that what she did wasn't nice. And in fact, Professor Walsh says something about how, it's not her job to coddle her students. And Buffy says, like, you're right. It's not your job to be kind to another human being in pain.
A human being in pain has nothing to do with your job. And the way she said it is like, be a human. It's not your job. It's your,
your species.
Your duty as a human to care for other people. But
and then Buffy walks out. And the best part is Professor Walsh turns away and she says to Riley, I really like her. And Riley responds with, really? You don't think she's peculiar? Like, they could have called this episode Peculiar and it would have worked.
And so then Riley goes back to his hall, Lowell house, and he is talking with Forrest and Graham, and he is recounting that Buffy told off Professor Walsh and what she said to them. And like, Forrest is super impressed, and Riley's like, I can't believe that she did that. What was she thinking? And Forrest is like, that's awesome. Like, and then they see, now this is, I'm a little bleh. Parker shows up. Is Parker part of their house? Like,
either he's part of their house or he has a friend that is what I took it as.
And they're like, hey, Parker, tell us about Buffy. And he is disgusting. Especially after she saved his life.
Yeah, after she saved his life. And not only is he disgusting specifically about Buffy, but then he starts saying, like, do you know the difference between a toilet seat and a freshman girl? And the pun, like, you can just see, you can see Riley's face, like, he is not amused. And you can see him getting more and more not amused as this goes on. Parker has no self-awareness or awareness of his surroundings. Otherwise, he would have stopped because Riley is much larger than him. Yep. And so the punchline to that awful joke is a toilet seat doesn't follow you around after you use it. And that's when Riley clocks him in the face. And for everyone who's ever watched Buffy. And then him and his friends are walking, and they're just like, our Forrest is like, dude, what if he reports you? Like, what were you thinking? Why did you do that? And his other friend is just saying, like, it'll be fine. He's gonna be too embarrassed to say anything anyway. He's not worried. He's like, good for you. And this is when Riley realizes he likes Buffy.
And his friends are like, you're an idiot.
We all knew that. Everyone knows it. And Riley says, I gotta go see a girl.
Yep.
Which is important because in the next scene, Spike is again on the floor of this white room looking very dead with his chapped lips. I hate chapped lips, so I really like focus in on that. I'm just like, give them some chapstick for the love of God. And the initiative science-y people come and are putting him onto a gurney, but Spike is faking it. And he says, sorry, gotta go see a girl, as he starts kicking the shit out of them.
Yep.
But he's experiencing some pain while doing this.
Yep.
Which is new for both Spike and the viewers.
Yep.
But Spike's little vampire friend is saying, let me out. I know how to get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And so he rips a card away from one of the initiative scientists and swipes it. And they start to make their getaway as the initiative starts to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Spike very quickly turns on his new friend because it's Spike, and this is not really his friend.
Yep.
And as like initiative guys come out of the elevator, and Spike says, "New plan. We split up." Throws the vampire into the initiative and scoots under a door that is closing.
Mm-hmm.
Out into the world, which I'm sure at this time, they say later he escapes about 2 p.m.ish, between 2 and 3 p.m. So it would have been light outside.
I'm guessing he probably escaped into tunnels.
Yeah. So they have to be attached to tunnels, but you would think that they'd be able to shut those down, but apparently they've never prepared for this circumstance.
For a hostile escaping? Of course not. They're the military. They're in complete control.
Mm-hmm. And then we have Willow in her dorm listening to sad music, and Riley showing up and saying, "Gee, hope I'm not interrupting anything really depressing," which is one of my favorite. This entire gold. Anything that deals with Willow in this episode is gold. She has all of the great lines, and those interacting with her have all of the great lines. Her and Riley, and then later her and Spike, but just fantastic. So he comes in and he's upfront with Willow. He says, "I like Buffy. I thought, I could talk to you and get like the inside scoop." And she's like, "I'm no rat," basically.
Mm-hmm.
And quickly realizes that Buffy's bag of steaks is out and open by her bed, and gets up and walks over and starts trying to push it under. And Riley's just like, "Oh, let me help you with that." And he doesn't look at it. He's still talking to Willow and just pushes it under, which is very considerate because he probably realizes, since he is the TA for a psych class, if she's trying to like hide something, he's like, "Oh, it's probably like a bunch of dirty underwear or something, or sex toys.
Sex toys.
I'm just gonna push this under the bed for her.
Your special stakes and crosses.
Sex toys."
For Drusilla manacles.
Right. Exactly. Those things got around.
And I do love, Willow says to him, "Okay, let's say I help you, and you fall in love and time stops, and then one of you like breaks up with the other and leaves the other one behind, like barely a human being." And Riley's like, "Yep, that's the plan."
And Willow's tone changes, and as she goes, "That's what I thought." Like it makes her feel better that he's, I don't want to say playing along, but he's not being offended by what she's saying.
Yeah.
He's a really good sport about everything.
And so he says, "I have an honest face." And she says, "I've seen honest faces before. They're usually attached to liars."
Yeah. And Riley is just like, he doesn't think he's going to get anywhere with Willow and the help. So, he goes to leave, and Willow goes, "Buffy likes cheese."
Yep. Not the key to her heart, but she likes cheese.
And then she tells him about Mr. Gordo and the ice capades in a non-ironic way, and that they're going to the party that just so happens to be at Riley's house, dorm.
Yep.
Thing.
I think it's a house because they say it's Lowell House.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a hall. She's in Stevenson Hall.
Yeah, but I'm like, just so viewers or listeners aren't confused, it's not his house like with his parents. It's like a dorm.
Or like a frat house.
Yeah, although this is not a frat.
No, but it might be like a instead of a
You have
frat,
to apply to
a campus, campus group house.
Yes, sometimes they have them for honor society type things, that sort.
Yeah.
So Riley says something about how like he feels much more confident now that he has his little accomplice, meaning Will, and she's like, "I'm not your accomplice. No." And he's like, "Of course not." So he scampers off much happier than when he entered, and she's feeling better too. Like,
she's got something to do. She's got, something to keep her mind off of Oz, which is setting Buffy up with a good guy.
yeah,
Especially since Buffy's last experience was Parker.
yes, a good guy and someone with a pulse. So all these things are good. Now, Riley also is a friend to Willow. In fact, he is Willow's friend far faster than Buffy's. They have a lot in common that way. And this is the first time that Buffy has dated someone that is the case, right? Like, Willow and Angel weren't hanging out with something that did not involve Buffy. So it's a good sign when your significant other or potential significant other gets along well with your friends and forms friendships that don't revolve around you.
Yep. And I also want to say that Riley uses the word courted.
Yes.
I've never courted a girl like Buffy before.
Nice Midwestern boy from a farm.
Well, I mean, I have to say that some of the best relationships I've ever had in my life were ones where the person, made it clear from the very beginning that they wanted a relationship. Like, because I think there's a lot different between dating and courting. Right? Dating is kind of feeling each other out of like, do we not? Courting is when you're like, I think we do. Let's, progress forward.
I think of the two as interchangeable, but for me, I would say the best relationships I've had were ones where my current partner, we met online, like, so it was very clear, like, that's what you're there to do, but otherwise they were friendships that evolved. Which you don't really no, you do see it on Buffy, but you just haven't seen it yet. So now that Spike has escaped, he needs somewhere to go, and he goes back to Harmony, and Harmony is decorating their crypt cave thing, and she's putting up a unicorn poster, which you go, Harmony. I'm all about that life. And Spike comes in and he's saying he missed her and all this other stuff. And then he's calling her all these pet names, and he's looking for something. And he specifically says, my little mentholated pack of smokes. That's what he calls her, because that's what he really wants. That's what he's looking for. And they're gone. So Harmony is very excited to not initially see Spike because she slaps him initially, but then after his
her, she's like, staked me and then you broke up with me.
And he's like, but I also missed you. And they, she at that point is very excited to see him. And what's interesting is, so she jumps on him basically and starts making out, and he goes, ow, my head. And he keeps talking about his head because he doesn't know this yet, but there's a chip in there.
They performed brain surgery on him, which he does not realize. When did they perform brain? I guess right from the very start, before he even woke up that first time.
Yep. I think it's kind of like when they tag sharks or something. He's been tagged. In fact, that's what they call it, bag him and tag him. So, but yeah, right from then on, he's saying his head hurts. Now we have Xander and Giles in the woods, and it's nighttime, and Xander is narrating and annoying the shit out of Giles, and Giles tells him to shut up. He doesn't want to hear any of it. And that's like, we only get snippets really of Giles and Xander throughout this. Like there was one earlier that we skipped over where Giles is in Xander's basement with him, like Xander's mom calls down and I was like, do you and your friend want some was it Kool-Aid fruit punch? And Giles goes, ooh, is it raspberry fruit punch? And Xander's just like, oh. But yeah, we only get little snippets of them, so they're patrolling for Buffy, and Buffy and Willow get to Riley's house party. And Buffy's like, oh, they're the guys, whoever their friends are in college. And Willow's like, I'm gonna go get a drink. And she's like, and Buffy's like, okay. But Willow doesn't go to get a soda. She goes to get Riley.
Yep.
And gives him a rundown of her outfit and says, Buffy's there to dance. Yep. And Riley's like, I don't know how to.
Sensible shoes.
Yes. And Riley's like, I don't know how to dance. So this is a problem. And during their conversation, Willow says specifically to him, remember, if you hurt her, I'll beat you to death with a shovel. And when he looks at her, terrified, because he's already nervous, now he's terrified, she says, a vague disclaimer is nobody's friend. Have fun.
Yep.
A vague disclaimer is nobody's friend. Have fun. That is what I have taken from this episode and inserted into my daily life whenever I'm threatening people. Usually for my friends.
She's like, I will be with a shovel, because like she's a tiny little girl and she can't exactly say, I will use my magic hexes on you.
Well, what's also funny is in the next episode, we will see Willow beating someone with a shovel in Pangs.
Oh yeah. So
snaps for that. I love Pangs, by the way. I watch it every Thanksgiving, which is why I know that scene so well.
I was like, I don't remember. And you're like, Pangs. And oh yeah, okay.
As she's yelling, why won't you die? So normal things.
So then we flash back to Xander.
Oh no, not yet, because Riley goes over to say hi to Buffy first, and Buffy's like, hey, and he doesn't know what to say to her. This is another very genuine interaction when you're feeling somebody out or like trying to show them that you're interested. And he's like, so did you do the reading? And she's like, yes. And he's like, interesting theories, huh? Cheese?
Yeah, he just it's not like he's offering her the cheese platter. He picks up one little toothpick with one piece of cheese and is like, cheese?
Mm-hmm. And she has that look of like, you're weird. Peculiar. Yep.
All right, so then we flash back. Xander and Giles have split up, and Xander comes across Harmony, which is one of my favorite scenes in this episode, where Harmony's crying, and they kind of like first start with each other. He's like, I am trained to stake you, and she's like, I can kill you, and they start like slap fighting each other. And I love that they slow-mo parts.
Oh yeah.
Like it's the slow-mo bitch fight. Like
it's fantastic. Like that whole thing is great because that's what those characters would do.
Mm-hmm.
Like they've both been in some serious takedowns, but put against each other, totally, they would go to slap fighting and hair pulling.
Well, yeah, I mean, because it's Xander and it's Harmony, and they're just bringing out that like high school nature that they had against each other.
I feel like it goes deeper than that. I think this is like some stuff that they're reenacting from like elementary school,
middle school,
kicking each other in the shins. And Harmony is out because she has a bundle of stuff that she is throwing gasoline on or lighter fluid to set aflame. Mm-hmm. And when they finally agree to let go of each other so that they can continue about their lives, Xander is like, I'll leave you to your burning of stuff. And she's like, this isn't my stuff. Do you think I'd listen to the Sex Pistols? Which tells everyone right there it's Spike's, although I'm sure everyone has pieced that together already.
Yep.
And she starts going on and on about Spike and how he's back and how all he wants to do is find the Slayer. And Xander hears this and is like, oh God, I got to find Buffy, and takes off. And of course, Harmony is like, why do you guys always leave me?
Yeah, she looks around all by herself.
Yep.
So after Riley has burned, crashed and burned with Buffy, he goes and he sits next to Willow. And
I love this.
They're talking for a little bit, and then a Dingoes Ate My Baby song comes on, And Willow gets super sad, and Riley like immediately does the sweet thing where he like says to the DJ guy, like, nix this song because it's causing bad feelings for Willow.
Mhm.
And then he's like trying to cheer her up, and she's like, I'm just gonna go home, but like she says, I want you to go find Buffy and tell Buffy I went home so that you have something to talk to Buffy about.
Yes.
Like, go try again. And
like we see a friendship here. Like this is actual friendship. Willow comforting Riley and being honest with him that he crashed and burned pretty big. And then Riley, stopping that song, and he doesn't know why. He just knows that she's upset, and then comforting her. And then even in her upsetness, setting him up for success, or at least trying.
Yep.
She's trying, but it doesn't work out that way. He goes over to her and, again, lets her know that Willow is left, and she does get concerned. He's like, no, she's fine. She just went home.
Mm-hmm.
And then Xander comes running and he's like, I have business to talk to you about. And
unfinished business. And she's like, okay, gotta go. And then Forrest comes over and he's like, she left with another guy. Like she ran off with another guy. They're probably making the sex. Is that what he said?
Yeah, or like, I think he might have said making the naked sex.
Making the naked sex.
Yeah.
And he says, we're needed downstairs. And so then we get this scene where they're walking downstairs and they go and they stand in front of a mirror with Graham, and their eyes get like beamed, and they're just talking about one girl, and they're having, guy talk as they are, like going in this secret elevator, going down the secret elevator with the voice activated, like passcode. And that's when Forrest is like, we have a secret sort of thing. And that's when Riley says, what kind of girl wants to get with Mr. Joe Average during the day, turn demon hunter at night?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we know that Buffy would be into that.
Yeah.
So we arrive at the initiative, which we knew what was happening. We've had an idea, but
as soon as we saw the scan, yeah, and the white elevator.
Yep, we're like, okay, it's the initiative. But then we meet their boss, and it's Professor Walsh.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Which explains some of the extra fear that Forrest has.
Can we pause?
Oh, yeah. We are recording again.
Okay. So
I didn't know if you were continuing your thought or not.
Yeah, so we see Professor Walsh is their boss with her wicked hair. Her hair seems a lot more like slicked back, or like windswept, maybe. I don't know. There's some kind of product in her hair that wasn't there during class.
Maybe she has a hot date later with Hostel 17.
And she lets them know that Hostel 17, which is Spike, has escaped, and she wants them to suit up. And then we see Riley giving orders to 3 different teams of initiative soldiers,
including friends,
including Graham and including Forrest, who are his team, their alpha team. And so, they're going to get together and they're going to find Spike. Meanwhile, Buffy's like, oh, hey, Spike's looking for me. I'm just going to go sit out and be bait and then lure him somewhere and we'll fight.
Yep. And Xander very smartly gives her the flare gun and says, take this with you. If you get in trouble, we'll come running. Which Giles' place has to be so close to anywhere that Buffy is going to go sit for that to work. Again, Sunnydale, super small.
Yep.
But Spike is very smart because Giles says, like, Spike's gonna find her. Like, that's what he's looking to do. Spike's very motivated. He's already killed 2 Slayers. He's going to find her. And sure enough, Spike, being the very smart and up on everything human vampire, breaks into the school records room and is on the computer and is looking for where Buffy's dorm is. Finds it, of course, and it was like, what was it? Hello, darling, or hello, pet, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. From room 214, Buffy's room.
Yep.
Hello, gorgeous. Maybe.
Hello, gorgeous. Yeah. And then Riley and his friends stumble across Buffy
sitting on a bench, being all cute.
Yep. And we have to get her out of here.
Yep. Well, Forrest wants to use her as bait, which is what Buffy is doing. Buffy's like, I'm bait. Forrest is like, let's use her as bait. And Riley's like, no, we're not using the girl I have a crush on as bait, and pulls rank. And Forrest gets pissy about that. Like, Forrest is like, and I can understand saying we're not using a civilian as bait, but like just in general, not like not using a girl, like we're not using a civilian as bait, but like
I think clearly they've done it before.
Yeah. And Forrest has an issue with, Buffy getting special favoritism in this situation.
Well, I mean, Forrest will have various issues with lots of things. He's an interesting friend. I think the other thing is, so that we haven't touched on, is I think Forrest is the first
male black protagonist.
He's the first character that is almost a regular who's of color.
Yeah.
Period. Like Kendra is there like in what 2-3 episodes, but he's throughout most of this season.
Mm-hmm.
So he's
like we've got Mr. Trick,
yes,
who ish was a regular, but he was a bad guy. This is our first time having someone who is just kind of on the fringes, like becoming part of the ensemble cast.
Mm-hmm.
And then they make him evil, which pisses me off. But
well, I also wouldn't necessarily like how they're setting him up through this. I wouldn't put him as a protagonist. He's not someone I'd want to be friends with. Like how he talks and things like that. That's not someone I wouldn't want to be friends with necessarily. And he says, because problematic things throughout this episode, even when he's the one who says to Riley later that they have to take Willow.
Yeah. Yep.
So he's not positioned as a protagonist.
But he's not positioned as
neutral. He's a neutral character. He's not a protagonist and he's not a villain yet.
He's ensemble cast.
Yeah. But so yes, so Riley takes off most of the commando gear and is left with like a shirt and pants that you can get away with wearing.
Mm-hmm.
And goes up to Buffy and is like, hey, what are you doing in the middle of campus sitting here by yourself? Don't you think that's not safe? Why don't you go back to your dorm?
Yep.
And they're both on secret missions trying to get the other to leave. So they're both being kind of rude to each other.
Yep.
It's a very funny interaction. Although Riley also says something, she was like, why don't you go back? It's not safe for you either. And which leads to the thing where he's basically like, well, I'm a guy, I can take care of myself, and you're a girl and you can't. And what is the word? Teutonic. Which Xander used initially to describe, which does not seem like a Xander word.
And I'm trying to remember.
Willow definitely taught Xander that word. There's no way that is a Xander word.
Relating to the Teutons, a Germanic branch of the Indo-European family. So who are the Teutons?
Definitely a Willow word. But yeah, this is when
the Proto-Germans, like during the pre-Roman times.
That does not explain anything. Doesn't explain anything. It's clearly an insult. This is the most bizarre reference I think that Buffy has ever made. Not Buffy herself, because she has just heard it. But Buffy the show.
Well, because I always heard it. I always, for some reason, thought it meant like caveman.
Yeah, same.
But it's past caveman, but it's still like
not caveman. but it's not caveman.
It's not caveman. It's past caveman. It's, still early, early empires.
Mm-hmm. Yes. But
Anyways. So then they hear a scream and both of them peace off in the other direction. And then we kind of cut backwards in time because we find out what that scream was. Willow's playing her sad music and there's a knock at the door and she says, "Come in." And
I just assumed, so maybe that's the case. I thought that Spike like attacked somebody else, or
if he'd attacked somebody else, then he would have hurt before. I'm pretty sure that the scream that we heard is Willow.
Okay.
So he comes in and he's like, I'm going to turn you out. And she's like, "Do you want a spell? I can do a spell." Like, and he's like, "No, don't want a spell. Want to leave a message for the Slayer, which is, you being dead. And I can either keep you dead or bring you back like me." And she says, "I'll scream." And he says, "Bonus." And she screams. And then he like covers her mouth and turns on the music. And very rapey feels.
Oh, this whole scene's very rapey. Yeah. For that scream to be heard outside, and like, because we don't hear music cut in, the music is louder than the scream.
Mm-hmm.
They would have had to be right next to the dorm, and the dorm, I feel like that it doesn't make sense. It doesn't line up for me. I don't think if they were meaning to do that, it doesn't line up very well.
Mm-hmm.
But and they're able to track Spike because of the chip in his head. It's a tracker. And it's also very important that when I don't know if you mentioned this or not, but Spike knocks and Willow says, "Come in." So because I think we've talked before about how do vampires just go into rooms, but Spike's actually invited in.
Yeah.
But we know that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, as vampires have come into that specific room before uninvited.
Yep. And so the next thing we see is like Spike at the edge of the bed looking depressed and Willow lying back on the bed, and they're having the impotence talk where he's like, "That's never happened before." And she's trying to like reassure him, like, "Maybe you were nervous." And
I'm only 126 years old.
Yep. Like, this is happened to him.
And then Willow starts blaming herself. Like, "No, you wanted Buffy. I just happened to be here. You didn't want to bite me." And Spike starts reassuring her. He's like, "I'd bite you in a heartbeat." And he was like, "I've thought about it before. When you were wearing that pink
fuzzy number with the lilac underneath."
And he gives her that look like, and she's like, "Oh, you played the bloodlust. So cool." It is such a hilarious scene. Like this part, the first rapey part is a lot. It's very, if you're someone who's experienced that, I can't imagine watch it. Like, I love Buffy, and then watching that scene, that's very traumatic. But this scene is hilarious.
Yeah.
And Willow, like at one point, she says, "We can wait a half an hour and try again," realizes what she said and smashes her lamp on his head.
Yes. And like, you see, she's like, "We can wait," and you can see the realization in her eyes and in her expression of, "Hang on a second. I have been Stockholm syndromed right into
Yep.
like,
what is this nonsense?" And so Riley and his little friends have realized what room. He doesn't know that it's Buffy's room, but he knows what room it is that Spike's in because he reads cold. Yep. So I guess it probably gives a general vicinity, the tracking, and not exactly where he is. Like they can't just like beep, 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 beep. It's not hot and cold like that.
Yeah.
But it's hot and cold by looking at humans versus vampires. So right as Willow bashes Spike in and goes for her door, the lights cut in the entire dorm, and she's struggling with the door. They kick it in. Yep. And they have on night vision and whatnot. They kick it in, and Willow jumps like out at them, like she wants the hell out of that room. And then Spike comes out, and he is still like he's trying to fight and get away, but he's having the head pain. You're making a face.
Sorry, yeah, I was trying to figure it out. He keeps trying to attack. Every time he's trying to attack, every time he tries to bite Willow, every time he's attacking the initiative, he is in excruciating head pain.
And James Marsters does this very well. Like his I'm in pain in my head. I have had migraines where I felt like that. Yes. So they zip tie. I don't know why they just zip tie, but they just zip tie Spike's hands behind his back.
Yep.
And they go, got him. Willow's curled up on the floor, and Forrest says, you know, she could have turned. We got to take her with us. And like Riley initially says no, but then it's protocol, and he's like, ugh. And when he goes to grab Willow to contain her, Buffy's there, points the flash gun, at, and says contain this, and pulls it, because they're wearing those night goggles. I mean, it's going to be a lot for someone who's not to suddenly have that, but if you're wearing night vision goggles, that's blinding.
Yep.
So Buffy then just starts kicking ass. Her and Riley specifically get into it.
Yep.
And neither one knowing that it's the other one.
And she just completely lays waste to Forrest and Graham, and then has a sparring match with Riley.
Yes.
And because afterwards, Forrest and Graham are like, he was huge. He was so strong. They had to be a guy.
Yeah. But Riley doesn't say a guy. Like, he knows that it was, because he said whomever or whatever it was.
Yep.
And they think that whoever it was or whatever it was is in league with Spike.
Yep. So
Spike gets away during this.
Yep. Spike just whoosh away because Spike
crashes out a window.
And so he escapes, and so Riley orders him to retreat, and then Professor Walsh is pissed. Although first I want to talk about like Buffy going over to Willow. Like, you know, there's this very definite like protective moment.
Oh yeah, because the other thing is, so she wants to get Willow back into the room before anyone realizes who was attacked by the vampire, because she doesn't want those guys coming back for Willow, and that, you know, she was fighting them as well. So she gets both of them into the room real quick. Yeah. And Willow's holding her neck. Like, Spike broke skin. That didn't prevent him from doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's very protective of her Willow.
Yep. And so Professor Walsh is pissed, and she wants a report, but she is happy to hear that her inhibitor chip works, and that Hostile 17 cannot inflict any harm on a living creature without experiencing intense neurological pain.
Yes. Leading to so much fun with Spike. And
so then we go to next day. Riley sees Buffy on the quad and runs to talk to her. And you know, they both kind of apologize for their behavior the night before. And then there's, you know, Buffy says Willow's fine. You know, there was that prank that happened, one of the frat boy pranks that, you know, upset her.
And Riley says, oh, I forgot that was your dorm. And Buffy's like, you knew that was my dorm? And he said, oh, I asked Willow for her help on a project. How's that going? I'll let you know.
Yep, he'll let you know. And then he says, did Willow tell you I like cheese?
Yep.
And Buffy says, you're a little peculiar. And he says he can live with that.
And then they just walk off together. They're like chatting. It's great. I love the beginnings of Riley, and I love Riley and Buffy this season.
Yes.
Once we get in next season, but I love them this season.
And I'm just really excited because next week we're back in LA, the City of Angels, for Bachelor Party, which is a Doyle episode. And I do enjoy Doyle.
Yes.
And then we're back in Sunnydale for Sabrina's favorite episode.
We should like eat mashed potatoes or something, like something Thanksgiving-y while we film. I say mashed potatoes because they've always been my favorite part of every holiday. So
okay,
you might just see me like a little chipmunk filled with my cheeks filled with mashed potatoes. That'll make for great listening, right?
Yep. Yep, I'm sure. All right. Thank you for just jostling with me today.
Thank you. And we will see you next week in LA.